everyone, and welcome back to another video. So today I'm actually going to be talking to you guys about all things postpartum, things that people don't tell you about postpartum, and just my experience in general and how my postpartum journey went. I'm currently 7 weeks postpartum. I just want to kind of get into my experience and some of the things that worked for me and whatnot. So let's get into it. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is your first bathroom experience postpartum. So for me, I actually had to stay on magnesium sulfate for 24 hours after I had given birth, which means I had to be bedridden for another 24 hours after I had given birth. I had massagers on my legs. I had a catheter in, and I could not move from my bed for 24 hours after I had given birth. So that was tough in itself. And so I didn't go to the bathroom until probably 6 a.m. on September 19th. So my first experience going to the bathroom, the nurse had to help me because I could not walk. And one thing that really was crazy to me is how heavy you feel when you get up for the first time. You feel extremely heavy and you feel like you weigh 1,000,000 pounds and you are trying to walk, and it is just crazy. And for me, I had been bedridden for two days by then. 2 days, because all throughout my labor I had to be bedridden, and then after, for 24 hours after, I had to be bedridden. So it was quite the experience. It was quite terrible, honestly. I'm not even going to lie to you. I hate sitting in bed, and sitting in bed was terrible, and trying to take care of my son while I was sitting, it was just not fun. So the first time I went to the bathroom, the nurse had to help me, and I actually had to give her a sample of pee because I don't really know, they just wanted to make sure that after the catheter everything is working correctly. So I was scared for the first time because I was like, oh my gosh, people say it burns, people say all of these terrible things about you going to the bathroom for the first time, and honestly it really wasn't that bad. They give you, I'm going to show you what the hospital had given me after I had given birth. So they had given me this pad to put on, which is really nice to keep everything, in its place, and it just feels so secure, and everything just feels really nice. And everything has a place to go, obviously, because it's so big, so that's nice. And then also they give you these underwear that are very comfy. People do tell you to bring underwear to the hospital, but I used these and I loved them, and I felt like they were really nice to keep everything, kind of where it needed to go as far as the pad. And then they also gave you these witch hazel pads that go on top of that to soothe it down there, so that was very helpful as well. And it just keeps everything in place. And I also had an ice pack the first day because everything is so swollen down there. You would be so surprised at how swollen it looks when you get done giving birth. It is crazy. And they also gave me a squirt bottle. I forgot what those things are called, but I actually left that at the hospital in the NICU on accident when I had left with Bryson that day. So, like I was saying, when I went to the bathroom for the first time, everyone had said that it was gonna hurt and that it was gonna sting and that this and that, but honestly it didn't. It didn't sting at all for me. Even though I had the catheter and everything, I still feel like I was fine. Everything was fine. And you are bleeding quite a bit at that point, not to the extent of what I had anticipated. I really had thought that I was bleeding a lot more than I was, but people set you up for thinking things that are not true. Again, it's different for everybody, so you might have more bleeding than someone else, but for me it wasn't as bad as I had anticipated. So just don't set yourself up for the worst, because it's probably going to end up being a little bit easier unless you tore more or didn't tear as much. Just depends. I didn't tear. I got an episiotomy, so they did cut me because my band was so tight. They only cut me in, I want to say, 2 spots, and I got stitches in 2 spots. It was internally, not externally, so it really wasn't that bad. It didn't really hurt very much. I would say when you breastfeed and you get the cramps, and the cramps do hurt a little bit, and they do give you some pain medication. I cannot remember, but they kept giving me the medication for the cramps and stuff, and they also get you to take the stool softener, which takes me into you pooping for the first time after birth. I know this is really TMI, so if you don't want to listen to this, just skip through. But the first poop after you give birth is some serious stuff, because honestly my stomach had hurt. I had not went to the bathroom, went number 2 in a day or 2, so it was quite an event in itself. That probably was the worst part, I would say, postpartum, was the pooping, because you literally sit there and it just hurts, and you're scared to push it, and you're scared to like do all that because you don't want to like tear anything, and it is just super hard. That's why they give you the stool softeners. I sat on the toilet probably for like 45 minutes trying to just finish and just get everything done, because by the time I had sat down, I was like, I am not going to get up again. And once I get up from the toilet, I'm not going back to the toilet for another probably hour or so, because I just did not want to get up. So that is the whole situation of going to the bathroom after you give birth. It is quite a event in itself, and that's something that I wasn't prepared for, and I didn't hear a lot of people say, was that when you go number 2 after you give birth, it is a whole nother situation. As well as the fact that they would come in every once in a while and push on your stomach to make sure everything was going well and check your bleeding and everything. So that was very uncomfortable. The pushing on the stomach was very uncomfortable, but they're just trying to smush your uterus down so that it can go back to its original size. Another thing I wanted to talk about postpartum is your stomach and that kind of situation of like your weight and how much you lose after you give birth and all of that. So I would say I gained 41 pounds during my whole entire pregnancy, and I went to 36 weeks. So I lost about 20 pounds just in giving birth in itself, and my ankles and my legs and everything that was so swollen on my body had shrunk back so quickly. So after I gave birth, within 24 hours, I was back to my original size as far as my ankles, my calves and everything went, and I didn't realize how swollen I was until I looked at my ankles and saw how skinny they were after, because I was like, oh my gosh, I was so swollen. It was crazy. I was so used to that I was like, wow, I look like a stick that could like snap in half. So about a week after, I was pretty small. I shrunk back pretty quickly, and then after that, by like week 2, I was skinnier than I was pre-pregnancy, which is crazy. I was skinnier than I was pre-pregnancy, and I was just, you do feel squishy and stuff, which is normal, but everything kind of shrunk back quickly for me, and it could be because I'm young, and I know that probably has a lot to do with it, but I didn't wear any girdles or any wraps or anything after, and I just shrunk right back. And a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that I did breastfeed for 3 weeks, and that's something that I want to get into next. So for me, my experience with the breastfeeding and everything postpartum, my milk came in quite quickly after. I actually had the lactation consultant come in, and she gave me breastfeeding tips, and she gave me pumping parts, and she gave me everything I needed for the baby. So when I had pumped for the first time postpartum, I was pumping like ounces. It was crazy. I was pumping so much. The lactation consultant was so surprised by how much milk was coming out of me and how much I was pumping that she was like, wow, like you could literally feed the whole hospital with this breast milk, feed all the babies. I was like, oh my gosh, like that makes me feel so good, because I was so nervous about the breastfeeding, and I was so nervous that nothing was gonna work. And so that was just awesome in itself, that I could pump that much milk, and it was just crazy. And I was knowing that I was supplying enough for Bryson, and I just felt so good. So him being so early, he was very tired, and the medicine that I was on during the birth made him tired, and so the breastfeeding didn't go very well. He did latch pretty well in the beginning, and but he was so tired that he would fall asleep at my breast and not eat very much, and that is why he got the jaundice. We had to supplement with the bottle for after every feeding to make sure he was getting enough. So he would feed for like 15 minutes on each breast, probably even less time than that, like 5 minutes, because he would just not last very long. And we would try everything from taking his clothes off to just, the techniques that they told us about the cheek and the chin and everything, and massaging it to make him wake up and stuff like that. But it wasn't working very well. So I was supplementing, and by that time he had gotten so used to the bottle that the breastfeeding was just not going very well. So I was just feeding him off the bottle and pumping. So I was basically exclusively pumping, which is not really what I wanted, but it was whatever's gonna work in the moment. And I figured, I still have milk, I can still get him to get on my breast when he's better. When he had went to the NICU, they actually didn't let us touch him for like a day and a half, because they had to get test results back. Since we had brought him home and then brought him back to the hospital, they had to make sure he didn't have some type of something. So we couldn't touch him. We had to actually put on like gowns and gloves and just different things. So I couldn't breastfeed him. So they were just telling me to pump and then feed him. They were feeding him from the bottle. So basically my son looked like he was like contagious and had like some kind of crazy disease, and I had to put gloves on and everything just to feed him. And so I couldn't touch him or hold him or anything for the first few days, which was really, for the first day and a half, which was really hard for me. And then finally there was one nurse that was like, do you want to breastfeed him? And I was like, yes, like I'll take any chance I can to breastfeed. So I was going in there every 3 hours to feed him, and he would feed for about an hour, and then I would go back to my room and probably go to sleep for the next hour and a half, and then I would go back and feed him again. So I was doing that for every 3 hours for 3 days, or for 2 days in the hospital with him in the NICU. So that was really tough in itself, and that is when my milk supply significantly dropped, because he was not breastfeeding at all. We weren't, for that day and a half, we weren't having any, he wasn't having any contact with my breast, so it was really hard. That is what has led us to formula feed him now, because my milk supply was never the same, and he took the bottle so well that when I would try to give him my breast, he would just scream at me and scream and scream and scream, because the bottle was just so much easier for him. So we ended up just switching to formula, and breastfeeding kind of just went out the window, and we just fed him the rest of the breast milk that I had pumped previously. So that is just what worked for us, and I did feel guilty for a long time afterwards, because I know breast is best and everything, but now I'm come to terms with the fact that as long as he's being fed and as long as he's getting the nutrients that he needs and he's growing, that is what matters. So don't feel bad about your decision from switching to breastfeeding to formula, because the baby is going to be happy, and overall I'm happier with the bond that I have with him, because I'm not, so terrified of the next feeding, because that was what was happening. I was so terrified for the next feeding, and it would hurt, and pumping hurt, and everything was just not going the way that I wanted it to go. So just don't feel bad about your decisions. Just do what's best for you, because at the end of the day, you have to work with your baby, and if you both aren't, you know, benefiting from the breastfeeding, then it just is what it is. And another thing that I wanted to touch on is postpartum depression. So I did have some postpartum depression. I definitely believe that that's what it was. I don't think it was baby blues, because baby blues is way more mild than my case was. I'm not saying mine was severe, but it was definitely more than just your normal, like, oh, I just had a baby and I'm upset and sad and stuff. I think what contributed to mine was the fact that we did have some family issues in the hospital, a whole situation that I'm not going to get into, that definitely had affected my postpartum. And that was the first thing that probably made me the most depressed, that made me cry the most, as well as the breastfeeding definitely was a factor in that as well. And when I stopped breastfeeding, the postpartum depression definitely did get better. I was crying a lot, and I just didn't feel like I was bonding with Bryson the way that I should be bonding with him. I didn't feel like I loved him the way that I was supposed to be loving him. And there's just a lot. Everyone's just different. And I came to terms with the fact that I'm not the only one that feels this way or that felt this way. And, you know, you can't compare yourself to somebody else and how they feel about their baby or how their life is, because behind closed doors you don't know what's going on with someone. So definitely reach out for help if you do have postpartum depression. I didn't tell my doctor because mine had went away, but I did I did talk to my mom a lot, and I talked to my fiance about it, which they were both very supportive in the situation, and they really helped me significantly get through that time. Everything's just going so good now, and I can't complain. So that is going to be it for my postpartum video and for all things postpartum. I thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment down below some ideas for some more videos. I definitely have some more ideas for you guys, so just stay tuned for those, and I will see you guys in another video.